Hi, I'm Joy Sisiski. I'm the CEO of the Bay Area Jewish Federation, and I'm so glad that you joined us tonight. Thank you very much for making time to be here. I see that few people are still logging in, and that's great. We're happy to welcome everybody after work today. And I just wanted to say thank you and a welcome to joining this important discussion about the rise in anti-Semitism on college campuses. Tonight, we're going to be exploring three questions. How did we get here? Where are we now? And where are we going? And we're honored to have two really extraordinary members and guiding lights of our Jewish community, Paula Pretlow. Hi, Paula. And she is here as a trustee of Northwestern University, as well as Professor Mark Dollinger, a Jewish studies professor at San Francisco State. We're so fortunate that they're joining us to share their perspectives as trustee, as faculty member, and help us understand the events that are transpiring on college campuses, really evolving since October 7th. Before I introduce our guests, I just want to make a housekeeping note. You'll notice that the chat function is closed for this conference call, but the Q&A function is open. It's usually on the bottom part of your screen, and you're welcome to send questions at any time, and we'll be sorting them while we're talking, and we'll have a Q&A session at the very end, but we'll try and incorporate some of the big ideas that are coming through. So feel free to use the Q&A function at any time if you have something on your mind and you'd like it answered during the Q&A section at the end. So it is my pleasure to start by formally introducing Paula. Paula Pretlow has served as a trustee of the Weinberg Foundation since 2018. She's built her career on helping company leaders maximize shareholder value, negotiating hundreds of millions in revenue across her career. She's a former senior vice president of the Capital Group, which is a $2.6 trillion privately held investment management firm. She is passionately involved on foundation and nonprofit boards. I just mentioned the Harriet and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation. She serves as board chair, and the Kresge Foundation at and also on Northwestern University, which is her alma mater. She's going to talk a little bit about that. And right here in the Bay Area at Congregation Temple Emmanuel. Dr. Mark Dollinger holds the Richard and Rhoda Goldman Endowed Chair in Jewish Studies and Social Responsibility at San Francisco State University. Dr. Dollinger currently serves on the executive board of the Union for Reform Judaism. He is also the board president of URJ Camp Newman and a current board member of our Bay Area Jewish Community Federation. So I'm especially excited to have him here. Thank you, Mark. He also serves on the boards of the American Jewish Historical Society, where he chairs the Academic Council, Truah, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights, and the Judah Magnus Museum Foundation. We are really blessed to have them both here with us tonight, and we're going to start by setting the context. Paula, you serve as a trustee of Northwestern University, a position that holds fiduciary responsibility and helps shaping the policy of the university. Northwestern has been one of the universities that's been front and center in the headlines. In fact, Northwestern's president, Michael Schill, just testified in front of Congress last week. Can you tell us more about your personal experience as a trustee and as a Jewish person, and help us frame why Northwestern is really in the headlines?
Thank you all so much for being here this evening. It is a distinct privilege and joy to be with you this evening, especially as we discuss and talk about what's really a difficult topic. And being affiliated with Northwestern, being a trustee, let me first say I will not breach any fiduciary responsibilities tonight, but I will speak candidly and with my own opinions. I've been a trustee at Northwestern since 2016, and it's been a goal of mine, to tell you the truth, for many years before that. I feel like I owe Northwestern a lot. I was a scholarship kid from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and I have found it to be my honor to serve my university virtually since I left it, culminating now with serving on the board. I'm on the Nom/Gov committee, as well as Alumni Relations and Development. So it's a true honor and a pleasure to serve my Northwestern community. And as it's never been more difficult and more challenging than it is now. I'm one of several Jewish board members with the university as a university trustee. It's been a great experience. And I think if you ask my fellow Jewish board members, they would say the same. It has become increasingly challenging, however, post October 7th, and we'll get more into that as we go on. But why is Northwestern in the headlines so much? As one of the several high-profile elite universities who have been called in front of Congress to testify, our president, Mike Schill, has done so. Complaints about anti-Semitism from students at Northwestern started before October 7th. And I don't think this comes as a surprise to most people here, because we have understood that there's a rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses throughout the country. Northwestern has been no different. In January, a complaint was filed against Northwestern violating Title VI. That got the attention of the Department of Education. And after the encampment went up, after an agreement was made with the protesters around the encampment by Mike Schill, he was called before Congress to testify. So as one of the relatively few, but elite universities who has made it to the news, and especially since Northwestern was actually the first university or college to make an agreement with the protesters, I think that just amped up the headlines, and here we are today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate that sort of context setting. Mark, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your experience at SF State as a professor, your connections with the students. I had a chance recently to visit you and sit in on one of your classes, so I saw that firsthand, and really just what transpired on campus from your point of view.
Yeah, thank you. Also, along with Paula, just honored to be here and get a chance to talk about this topic. This is, I think, in many ways, a tale of two campuses. And for SF State's story, we've got to go back decades and decades. Richard and Rhoda Goldman of blessed memory endowed my position at SF State. And they did that, I think partially because of the anti-Zionist and sometimes anti-Semitic climate on our campus. And they were looking to have a Jewish studies academic and educational voice on campus in perpetuity. And the family has endowed 2 more chairs, after that. So by the time, October 7th came, we've already sort of been at this challenge around campus anti-Semitism and how we wanted to deal with it. I think probably the best way to describe sort of what's going on is to frame it as sort of what's in the public view, which folks may be aware of through the news and social media, but I'd really like to talk about also what's going on behind the scenes. And since I am a tenured professor without fiduciary obligation, I am freer than Paula is, to share. And in public view, so far, San Francisco State, which is typically in the news more than most universities, has been out of public view. We did have an encampment. It came much later than most of the other universities, certainly much later than Northwestern. Ours remained peaceful, thankfully, and our protesters reached an agreement with our administration and decamped a few weeks ago, as I think most of the universities did. But what I'd really like folks to understand is what's been going on within the university prior to October 7th. To whatever extent this is helpful, I can't say, but I do recommend this. We created something called a Jewish Campus Climate Committee. And this is under the direction of President Lynn Mahoney, who's been our president for like 5 years now. And she came in and made Jewish campus climate and campus anti-Semitism a central part of her administration. So she gathered all the administrators on campus for whom their job description could include a case of anti-Semitism. Jewish administrators, non-Jewish administrators, all coming together on a regular basis to talk and to learn with campus Jewish leadership, so that ahead of any issues, we're already ready to go. October 7th happened. Roger, our SF Hillel director, said, we actually need to meet more often. So we created kind of an executive committee of this. We're meeting sometimes weekly. We're emailing sometimes daily. Our university has a Jewish student life coordinator. This is someone in student affairs whose job it is to be the first point of contact anytime a Jewish student has an issue or concern, whether it's with a professor, administrator, classmate, whatever it is. It's like a central clearinghouse. We have a national organization run by professors called the Academic Engagement Network. Its job is to train administrators coast to coast on campus anti-Semitism. They've been at it for a few years now. President Mahoney sent her senior team on a 2-year leadership training program with this. I just want to say that our own administrators are now being asked to come back, in subsequent years and offer those trainings. And also, one issue we have around DEI is whereas anti-Semitism and Jewish students in DEI, SF State, I think, is in the lead with this. Dr. Frederick Smith, who's our DEI instructor, was actually invited by Hillel to come and give a presentation to Hillel with that. And most of all, I just want to offer credit to President Mahoney because she is in direct contact with campus Jewish leadership. We call, we email, we text. She asks for information that I can provide, on perspectives to help inform her leadership. And I'll just say, Roger and I from SF Hill, I'll get to have lunch with her next week to talk about last year and to talk about next year. And this is a meeting that she reached out to us and said, I'd like to bring you along.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Now, what's interesting, I heard you both talk about things that were in place prior to October 7th. So I'm going to ask you some questions about after October 7th and how that played out. Mark, can you tell us how Jewish leadership was involved with SF State as it moved through the negotiation process?
Okay, so I've learned informally, through talking to friends and colleagues, like the number one factor that's important, how much do university administrators and the president talk to and engage Jewish leadership, certainly on campus, and in Paula's case, certainly among the board, as they're going through the decision-making process, which is to say university presidents are obligated to each and every student. They are inevitably going to make decisions that somebody doesn't like, but are they reaching out and getting feedback and input and intelligence and as much as they can know at every step? And I can just tell you, I'm just, thrilled, that President Mahoney and I just have an open line back and forth. And we kind of joke with each other that sometimes we may not agree or disagree on everything. And I'm very clear as a faculty member that my job is different than hers. And it's just really great that I never, ever feel as if the Jewish concerns are unheard.
So it's sounds like a real partnership and a long one. So it's nice to hear that. Paula, can you tell us more about why you decided to resign from your appointment on Northwestern's Advisory Council on Preventing Anti-Semitism and Hate?
Absolutely. I did my research homework and asked a lot of questions before saying yes to joining the President's Advisory Committee Against Anti-Semitism and Hate, which he announced that he intended to set up in November. The committee was formed and announced to the broader community in January. I didn't take it lightly as one of only 2 trustees, Jewish trustee, the other trustee happens to be a Muslim trustee who was asked to serve and accepted his service on this committee. It was with great hope, actually, and the fact that it was one committee, not 2, as many universities had set up, a committee to advise against anti-Semitism, and another committee on Islamophobia. I thought it was a great differentiator that Northwestern and Michael Schill, who, by the way, is Jewish, thought that we would try something different and have one committee. So about 17 members of that committee. And I think, to be perfectly honest with you, not that I'd be anything else, but to tell you the truth, I think it was a failed experiment from the beginning. There was never really, despite the efforts among some of us to get a definition of, and commitment from one another in building trust on that committee and how to move forward, even though there were some definite goals that were outlined that the committee was to work on by the president, by the co-chairs. And I'll just tell you a couple of those because I just, for context, and I'm not disclosing anything that that can't be disclosed. But we were charged with listening to the Northwestern community to hear where the challenges, opportunities, hopes, and barriers, to consider how the committee could help inform larger conversations and curricular pedagogical engagements to help us learn more about hate, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia, to make recommendations to President Schill and the provost and other senior leaders for ways that Northwestern will continue teaching and learning components about our work. So that is what I went in with the understanding as a goal, and that it would be a committee that the president sought advice from. When the encampment went up on April 25th and an agreement was made with the protesters shortly thereafter, April 29th, 6 other Jewish committee members and I made individual decisions, but sent a singular letter to President Schill telling him why we resigned. First of all, there was no advice sought from the committee, including not even the co-chairs of the committee. And I will also say that there was no consultation, this has been in the news, with the executive committee of the board either. Given that, the charge of the committee was not upheld, we were not consulted, and we decided to resign. And again, this is public. We wrote, as members of the President's Advisory Committee on Preventing Anti-Semitism and Hate, we were not consulted by the university's leadership and had no role in the agreement reached between the university and the protesters on Deering Meadow. In addition, our committee was unable to reach a consensus on a statement condemning anti-Semitism we have witnessed. And so that's why, there are values and standards, and it becomes really, really easy when those are violated to make a decision. And that was my reason, and the reason of my fellow 6 other Jewish members. The next day, by the way, the entire committee dissolved when the remaining members said they could no longer continue their work. So that's why it was an easy decision to make given the circumstances. And I received a lot of pats on the back. There are also others who thought, well, you've let people down. How could you do that? But it's important to stand in one's values and take a stand.
I really appreciate that. And you say it's easy, but I still think there is a real act of bravery there in standing up and speaking out. So, I just want to acknowledge that. And I'm hearing from you, it's interesting, both of you. And we'll come back to this, I think, at the end when we think about where we're going. But, what are the lessons learned? Mark hit the nail on the head. This is a tale of 2 universities. And I'm also hearing, relationships and what role that plays in building relationships at these institutions. So we'll come back to that. Right now, I want to talk a little bit about what got us here. There's a growing political culture on campus around, campuses around the country that anti-Zionist, that it has this anti-Zionist rhetoric. People who think Israel is committing genocide, and, seemingly these words like Hamas and October 7th have just been written off. They're not in the language anymore. So Mark, can you help us understand a little bit about what that is and how it was created and what threat it poses, not only for Jewish students, but the student body in general?
Yeah, thank you. And this has been a question we've had at SF State, for decades. It's a fundamental question here. What does it mean to go off to college? What does it mean to be college educated if you're a high school student now, or the parent or a grandparent of a prospective college student? I know there's a lot of anxiety around. I'm in the humanities, so we want to read and think and write critically and analytically. That's kind of the easy part. Here's a more challenging part. We hope that our students learn how to make the world a better place. And we hope that education in college empowers them to graduate and go out into the world however they want to work for justice. And certainly the Jewish community, in our history has been deeply, deeply committed to social justice. Amongst some on the far left, the belief is that Zionism is racism. And as many people know, in the 1970s, United Nations actually proclaimed that before later, taking it back. But if you believe in fighting against, let's say, racism, which is a good thing to fight against, it gets conflated to fight against Zionism. So there has been, among some quarters of sort of leftist culture on some campuses around the country, a notion that it's the job of professors to teach anti-racism to their students, which means teach anti-Zionism to their students. So even in a course that's not even about Israel or Palestine, just in general. So what we have now since October 7th and with the encampments is the internalization of the idea that Zionism is racism. And then the internalization and the spreading then of the idea that this is a genocide that's going on, that this is apartheid, that this is colonialism. A lot of the slogans have been around actually since the mid-1960s, but what we've seen in the last 6 or 7 months is the way in which it has become more universally accepted amongst more and more of the college-age generation. And I think, as most of us are also probably aware, even a lot of Jewish youth are also in different ways subscribing to those thoughts.
You're starting to touch on this. Why do you think these students pick Gaza as the rallying cry as opposed to some other war?
Yeah, in history, we call this causality. It's a really tough question, and I think scholars are going to be thinking about this for a long time. Just from the hip right now. I mean, in the left, or at least some elements of the left, Israel has always been seen as an apartheid colonial state. So we sadly, that is our baseline. I think that the operation in Gaza, the war in Gaza, and the civilian deaths which are occurring has really brought a whole lot of allies and a whole lot of students who are not otherwise engaged with the question into a place where they want to do what they can do as college students to help humanity and to stop the death of civilians. And I think the third point, and this is, I'm middle-aged, so I'll speak to this generationally. Most of our undergraduates have only known Israel from a right-wing revisionist Likudnik Netanyahu approach to what Zionism is. And one thing that I see in these encampments is a monolithic and flattened definition of what Zionism is, where they are taking one part of the far right wing of Zionism and normalizing that as if that represents the entire movement for Jewish national self-determination. And then they act on that without any sort of critical inquiry.
And Paula, what are you seeing from students at Northwestern in particular? I know you've talked to a lot of students.
Yes, I have. And I've talked to people who have talked to students. And I have to say first, Mark, I agree with you. It's a tough question. It'll be asked for a long time, but your assessment, I would absolutely agree with you. Students at Northwestern, Jewish students, not all, because not a monolith. And there are Jewish students who were in the camps, who were in the encampment. But if you have one student who doesn't feel safe, it's too many. And I talked with a number of students who just haven't felt safe. I heard the story about a student who felt so unsafe, in fact, that they asked a professor if they could camp out at their home, which they did. So it's really, really hard. And yet you hear other people, including a professor at Northwestern in our journalism school, who has written extensively and been published about how these encampments are joyful and merry and everybody is invited in, except if you're a Zionist. Zionists are not welcome. One of the things we saw at Northwestern were hateful signs going up. So if this was truly peaceful, the hateful signage with the president with horns and blood coming out of his eyes, the Magen David with a slash through it, the defacement of property. These are not peaceful acts. And so when some students will say, well, there are few bad apples in any crowd, that does not excuse it. So I have found that on the other side, some students are looking for easy answers to explain what's going on, but without really understanding the deeper meanings, perhaps, of what they're doing, what they're saying, and what truly is going on. So I think we have an obligation to educate, to make sure that students actually do know what they're chanting about and what it means.
Mhm. And Mark, you've talked a little bit about how student protesters are participating in something that you refer to as anti-normalization. Can you help us understand that and explain what it means? And again, how it's harmful to students, including Jews, but not only?
Yeah, thank you. First, I just want to affirm what Paula just said. Wouldn't it be great if these encampments were dedicated to peace as the goal of the encampment? And I've just noticed, as Paula was reflecting at Northwestern, that these encampments are really part of an anti-Zionist, eliminationist ideology. What does it mean to go off to college, right? That's the fundamental question. Wouldn't it be great if Zionists were actually permitted into these encampments, teach varieties of looking at Jewish nationalism, throwing the complexities that have made peace impossible all these years, and give our young people an opportunity to wrestle, and maybe they can come up with an answer. To me, that's what college should be. And what college shouldn't be, to transition to your question, it's called anti-normalization. It's a anti-Zionist ideology, which says you cannot normalize Zionism. You cannot do anything that makes Zionism seem like it's a normal part of the world. So on a university campus, for example, anti-normalizers will not take a Jewish studies academic class, because by taking a class where they learn about Zionism, they are normalizing Zionism. They are then aiding and abetting the enemy. So the answer to the cause, in their view of Palestinian self-determination, is no Jewish studies classes. So our Hillel has over the years tried to do dialogue groups with Palestinian students, which to me is what college is. Go meet people different from yourself, learn from them, and listen. Anti-normalizers will not engage in dialogue, because to sit across from a Zionist is to aid and abet the Zionist entity. Our school newspaper quoted one of our undergraduates as saying they wouldn't even look in the eye to a person they thought was a Zionist, because that would be normalizing. And then, in a prior presidential administration at State, we had the mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat, come to speak. And student protesters prevented him from speaking for an hour nonstop, because if you let a Zionist speak on campus, you are normalizing Zionism. And then, of course, I'll just make it the worst part of it. The logical remedy from that mindset: no Zionists permitted on the college campus, which to me is no Jews, it's anti-Semitic. So for me, the test of college administrators: do you think anti-normalization is a part of what it means to go to college or not? And these encampments have been arguing an anti-normalization, no Zionists allowed. How on earth is that college? That's a rhetorical question.
It's a lot. Now, I want to shift gears to where we are now. We're seeing college graduations play out across the country. I know, Mark, you had yours recently. And we're seeing disruptions and protests at some of these graduations. Do you think this is the end of it? What do you think is going to happen over the summer and into the fall?
Should I start, Paula?
You can go first and I'll follow up.
All right. I'll give you my snarky answer first, and then I'll be serious. My snarky answer is I'm an historian. It's tough enough to predict the past. I'm not good with predicting the future. Seriously, in my 20 years at SF State, there's a pattern. That is, when Israel-Palestine crisis hits in the Mideast, we get it on campus. And it only eases on campus once it's eased in the Mideast. So I think so long as the war in Gaza continues, we are going to continue to be experiencing this.
I agree. And I read earlier today, there was an announcement that the war in Gaza is likely to continue at least through the end of this year. So that means summer comes, school starts again. And what are we faced with? I was talking with a colleague at Northwestern about this today and asked, now, what's happening? What's today like on campus? What do you think? The protesters are angrier. They didn't get what they thought they were getting in the agreement they made with the president, who didn't consult with advisors. The faculty are mostly happy. There were a few hundred, a couple of hundred, who signed a letter to the Northwestern president applauding his actions. The campus right now is relatively quiet, but here's what's next. Saturday, June 1, the remaining tent that was allowed as part of the agreement that was made has to come down. Will it? We'll see. And then there's graduation. And already folks I'm talking with are expecting some sort of disruption. So I think we have a ways to go before things quiet down. And Mark, I agree with you. As long as this war persists, we're going to have flare-ups and maybe more of what we saw this spring.
Yeah, I think, a lot of the work that I'm seeing at the Federation too is about this reorientation to a long war. And what does that mean for Jewish community institutions, really at every level? How are we preparing to think about our work in Israel, to support organizations that are struggling here because of the war in Israel? Maybe it's taking up some attention. How do we keep our eye on building flourishing Jewish communities? And then, of course, like what are we doing to prepare the community and ourselves and our students and our kids and grandkids for what's to come? Before I get into the, where we're going, even though my mind's already headed in that direction as a hopeful problem solver, I want to ask you, because Paula, you just said something about the negotiation. I'd like to know, from both of you really, but Northwestern and SF State have agreed to look at their investment policies. What does it really mean? And do you think we're going to see changes in investment strategies? And these were some of the demands that protesters were making to universities.
Like I just said, the protesters, what they thought they were getting, and Mike Schill was very public about this at last week's hearing, that he would never recommend Northwestern divest of its investments in Israel, around Israel. Well, the fact of the matter is, a lot of those investments, or some of those investments, are private investments that we are invested in through investment funds. So it's not like we control them anyway. Other investments in the total scheme of a $15 billion endowment are rounding errors. So what the students thought they might be getting in terms of they're going to get a look at the investments and it's on the road to divestment, which is their ultimate goal. Mike Schill has already said that's not going to happen. And they're upset about that. Will there be a change in investment policy as a result? I doubt that very much. In fact, there was an analysis done to determine the exposure to some of those stocks that some of the protesters wanted to know about. They are so minuscule in the total scheme of our investments that they don't really make up much of anything. And I would venture to say that those very stocks that some of the protesters are asking about, their parents and they may have in their very own portfolios. So again, I think there's some education to be done around this issue of investments. But as far as policy being changed at Northwestern, Mike Schill has already said, no, it's not going to happen. And I can tell you as a former member of the investment committee, it would never fly.
Yeah, I love hearing your perspective, especially because you're in this business. So I know you have a lot to lend there.
If I can jump back a moment to Paula's comment on commencement, because I want to lift our SF State student leaders. What they, and I don't know that this would be helpful at Northwestern, but they made a video, our student leaders made a video where they told all the graduates and everyone at Oracle Park, tens of thousands of people, that this is a night to celebrate our graduates. And without mentioning specifically, the political issue at hand, they just let everyone there know that what they as students wanted to see in that evening was a celebration of student accomplishment. And I thought that was a class act, and I appreciated it. I'm not an investment person. I went into history to avoid math, so I'll give a different perspective on the divestment question, and that is that these deals around the country are basically falling into one of three categories. One category is they agree to divest from Israel, and they say that outright. The middle category is they don't use the word Israel in the deal, but they use code words like genocide and apartheid and ethnic cleansing, which are generally known to be the anti-Zionist accusations against Israel, as if they're somehow going to get away with it because the word Israel wasn't there. And then the third one is looking at a human rights filter, which many socially justice-centered mutual funds already do. And what I've advised, our leadership at SF State is to say, as Paula was expressing, when these meetings happen with the protesters and these investment committees and the decisions are made, someone's going to be unhappy, because the protesters are expecting I think a divestment from Israel. And I think those of us in the Jewish community are expecting not to be divestment. And as each of these decisions at each campus come down, these students are going to face the moment, assuming they're on the losing side from their perspective, of what they're going to do about it. And for the summer, I suggested to our leadership that this would be a good time for the administration to imagine the day after that meeting happens and what and how they would like to be prepared for.
Mm-hmm. You just started talking about social justice. Can you tell me, Mark, what it's like to be a socially conscious Jew in this political environment?
Really lonely. It is painful. So I'm a scholar of Jews and social justice, and I'll just, I won't mention names because they are students, but I've had Jewish students express to me that they want to walk into the encampment and have a conversation about social justice and Zionism. And the big old sign at the front says, "No Zionists permitted." So this student's standing outside staring in. And I think literally that happened on my campus. And I think that is a metaphor for what it is to be committed to positive change and not to have any political friends that would accept you because you're a Zionist.
So beautifully said.
So sad.
And I would just add that it means being brave and being willing to speak up and speak out because it's the right thing to do. It also means having a deeply embedded willingness to listen, to hear, even when you are going to undoubtedly hear things you don't want to hear and you certainly don't agree with, and managing through it. But it means standing there, bearing witness, and being brave, even if it is also lonely at times.
Paula, I think what you're actually doing is giving some advice. And, maybe this is a good segue to where we're going, because I know a lot of people are thinking about, what can we do to, meet the needs of Jewish students when they return to campus in the fall? What does it mean to be a Jewish student in college right now? And, how should we be preparing? I think you're right on the right track in thinking about like really solid, I don't know, maybe advice is not the right word, but how to start preparing our students for what it's going to be like to be a Jew in the world for this period of time.
We have to talk to our kids. We have to listen to them. Not all of our young people agree with the way we might think. We have to be willing to allow them the space and have the conversations around it all. I think as young people head back to campus or go to campus for the first time, Jewish students, I think, should seek out Hillel. And for all of us on the call, up the support for Hillel. I can just tell you that at Northwestern, it has been not without controversy for some, it has been such a safe haven for many, and many who had never stepped foot in it before in a Hillel. So I think we have to be prepared. I'm thinking of Northwestern and alums, be prepared to welcome those students, invite Jewish students into your homes, invite them for Shabbat dinner. I mean, really double down on what it means to be in community and what it means to take care of one another.
Mark, do you want to add anything?
I'd love to. I'm in way too many social media groups on campus anti-Semitism. Sometimes it's healthy for emotionally just to disconnect. So here's my first bit of advice to high school students and especially your parents. Go to the best school that you have worked so hard to gain admission to. This notion that you are not going to go to an outstanding school because of whatever the reputation or whatever someone wrote on social media, please, please don't do that. For our high school students who have been going through so much stress in the college admission process to get a coveted spot in a university where they have dreamt of going to, go. That's like number one. Number two, there is opportunity even in the heartache, which is this is a chance to challenge a lot of your assumptions. SF State, we're a very anti-Zionist place. And I can tell you, we're also the only department of Jewish studies in the Bay Area. So if we have an undergraduate that wants to learn Israel-Palestine, we're the best university on planet Earth. If the students would come and take Jewish studies and Palestinian studies, there it is, in order to see it. So it's a good opportunity to challenge yourself. And then I just affirm once again what Paula said. Jewish students need a safe place to go with people that they don't have to defend themselves or explain themselves, and they can just take a deep breath and enjoy Shabbat dinner and laugh and have a good time. Go to Hillel, support Hillel. It is more, it's always important. It is more important now.
Well, one of my last questions here was about what you thought, colleges could do to make Jewish students feel safe. And you answered that for me because you just painted a picture of what safe Jewish places look like. I think we're really lucky to have Jewish student groups, including Hillel's, which of course are longtime partners of Federation, and just trying to invest in those safe spaces for our students. I'm going to take a couple questions that I have from the Q&A chat. Is that okay with both of you if I transition? Okay. So I'm seeing them all on the back end. So I want to thank everybody who's asking questions. If you have more, please feel free to send them. We got a few about whether or not, the universities that you're working for are trying to inhibit in any way the truth about Israel or the, education about Israel.
That's an interesting question. I don't think so. As a whole, you have professors who have certain perspectives and certain ways that they teach. You also have some professors who are clearly anti-Zionist. And I know that there have been students at Northwestern who have complained about that, who have felt threatened by their professors. And that's a problem. But as an institution, no. And for individual professors who are threatening students, or where students are feeling threatened by what they're hearing in class by their professors, there are ways to file those complaints to be followed up on.
Let me ask you a question because I don't know this, Paula, myself, and this may help here too. Does Northwestern have an Israel Studies department? And Mark, I mean, I guess the question for you is, you're part of a Jewish Studies department. So where, and you just said something about this, but even more specifically, where are students getting information about Israel at college, like at the university?
Should I jump in?
We have Jewish studies, Israel studies. I'm not sure I don't think so as a department.
So
Mark?
I have an ask for everybody. And this is the word, the university. And this is just my empathy for President Mahoney. The university does not actually have a position, because we have something, at least in public universities, called viewpoint discrimination laws. The university actually can't take a position as a university, nor should it, because it should not be dividing its students. We have professors, as Paula said, within the university who are certainly taking positions which are objectionable and should be addressed at the professor level. But it's not the university itself that is doing that. And then that's the deeper question of, do we want to control anti-Zionist professors with academic freedom? I kind of appreciate my academic freedom on the other side too, and that's the deeper free speech question. We have a Professor Ron Kaplan is our Richard Norder Goldman Chair in Israel Studies, so we have an Israel Studies position within the Department of Jewish Studies, and he teaches on the conflict, he teaches on Zionism, he teaches Israeli cinema, and here's the sad news: my understanding is most of them are learning about Israel from TikTok. And from other social media platforms, and they're not learning about it in the classroom. And this is where the anti-normalization comes in too, because those who consider themselves to be the staunchest, ideologues, would not take one of Professor Kaplan's classes.
We had a couple questions about the influence. I'm trying to read them at the same time as they're coming in, and also listening to what you're saying. About the intervention by foreign countries pouring money, specifically Qatar, but not only, into American universities. This isn't a question specifically, I don't think, about SF State or Northwestern, but about the influence both of the number of foreign students who have visas that are coming to learn at our universities and the billions of dollars that are pouring in from other entities, and sort of the influence there on what's happening and whether or not there's a correlation.
Let me address, because someone might know and be asking a question around Northwestern's campus in Qatar, which has been around for quite some time, before I was on the board, so I didn't get a vote on that. It's the journalism school, and we have learned, and there are complaints, that there's a partnership with Al Jazeera. Now, there are also lots of women in Qatar who would not otherwise be allowed to go to school who Northwestern is training. That all said, that campus contract is up for renewal in a couple of years. So it is something that is actively being talked about. My position is that we should not be in Qatar, but I will also tell you that Northwestern does not receive billions of dollars. It's like $1 million a year, which is, again, insignificant in the total scheme of the overall university budget and certainly within the endowment. So that's what I can tell you. And when it comes up for a vote, and I know that I'm not the only one who feels this way, there are a number of us who recognize the successes of that campus, also recognize the deeply problematic nature, especially now and going forward, of having that as a Northwestern campus, and we'll have our voices heard about it.
And I'll jump in to sort of push back a bit on the question, or just say that it's actually a challenging question. I think it's less about foreign money or outside money and more about influence. And it may be more about where the influence is directed, which is to say, I'm conflicted because I hold a Goldman chair. Thanks to the Goldman family, I have a job and I love it at SF State. I like to keep my job. And the Goldman foundations are so sophisticated, they understand when they make a donation to a university, they actually don't get to influence who gets hired or what they say because of academic freedom. That to me is a healthy way in which outsiders can pour money into especially public universities that need private support now more and more. When we're talking about money coming in surreptitiously or money coming in that's going to violate the nature and purpose of the university, then, and I think probably that's where the question was going to, and certainly the what Paula was describing, could be going there. I think that's where we certainly need to be concerned. But I would rather have us focus on the influence rather than the money itself, because money can be used to support public education in really important ways that we need to do, so long as we're doing it in a way that respects what universities are there to be.
Paula, I have a question for you. In your role as a trustee at a major university, what role can alumni play in all of this?
Great question. Continue to be engaged with your alumni associations. Keep your relationships with the university going. Ask questions. Know who your trustees are and that they are there to serve the alumni and the university. So I get notes and letters all the time. I get spam too. But it's important to let the university know, let your trustees know what your questions, what your concerns are, and you should be heard and expect answers, and keep the pressure up.
Thank you. A lot of people asking who actually have kids that are younger than university, even though we're talking about college campuses, are there ways, Mark, you think we can talk about what Zionism means and what anti-Zionism is to, a teenager?
We must educate a developmentally appropriate spiraling curriculum from elementary school, which means it's now we're looking at Jewish education now, and specifically sort of a Jewish identity-based education. And the more they learn as they grow up and as they are exposed to complexities and as they challenge and wrestle with them through senior year of high school, they're going to come off to college and not be surprised by any of it. And I would rather have them not surprised than very shocked and surprised. I get a couple before October 7th. I would get a couple students a year show up in my office and they just learned something new that they never learned about Israel, about Zionism, about anti-Zionist ideology, and they're really upset about it. And first I smile and I say, "Welcome to SF State. How's college going for you? And what did you learn?" And then we chat, I give them a book, I recommend a class, right? To me, that's the process. And we should trust our students, and they're smart. And if they come to us with our questions, we need to be prepared to give them the complexity and the challenges that exist, and then hand off to them, because they're the ones who are taking it up from here.
Thank you. Okay, I have one last question for you, and this is also a future question, and then I'll just say a few words to wrap up. How should we be thinking in general about campuses and anti-Semitism as we're going into an election year with a big question mark?
You first, Mark.
Oh, thanks for that. I was going to say, all right, I'll take advantage. I got tenure. I should do this. Here's the biggest challenge about anti-Semitism. I'm going to do this in an apolitical way. I will be bipartisan. Anti-Semitism cannot be a partisan issue. It cannot be something that the political right is leveraging for their political benefit and the political left doing the same thing. This is something that needs to be independent of politics so that everybody can be against it, because it's something we all need to be against. The moment that Jewish leaders, Jewish scholars, are hauled before Congress so that politicians on both sides of the aisle can perform to show that they are the ones most committed to fighting. On the surface, it might seem like a good thing. I don't think it's good at all. I think we just need to lower that temperature and get ourselves focused on all of the isms together to fight.
And that's a mic drop.
Well, I want to thank you both, Mark and Paula, for this. First of all, it was great that you agreed to do this. And when we asked, both of you just said yes immediately, and to have a chance to prepare for this earlier this week. I just want to say thank you. And for everybody who joined and for your thoughtful questions, I just want to say too, these are great leaders in our Jewish community. We are so lucky to have them. And I think this is a great time for people to get engaged, even if they haven't been before. The Federation, of course, remains committed to supporting the Bay Area Jewish community during these challenging times. Some of what we do includes combating anti-Semitism, providing community security across Northern California, responding to emergencies, and like I said earlier, just really making sure that we are doing everything we can to protect a thriving and flourishing Jewish community, a joyful Judaism in the Bay Area. And I really don't want to lose sight of all of that here. For those of you who are looking for more information, the Federation has a really expansive resource guide on our website that highlights organizations that are doing some of the great work on college campuses and fighting anti-Semitism. So if you're interested in supporting any of them, that's a great place to look. And I really just want to thank you again for being here. I know that these are difficult and troubling times. There is still a lot to look forward to. I hear some optimism from Mark and Paula, and I just want you to know that we're thinking about you and everyone in the Jewish community, and thank you for being here. Thank you again, Paula and Mark.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for logging on.